Days before our wedding, my fiancée told me to give her parents shares. In my company, when I refused, she gave me an ultimatum I turned against her. By the time she asked for part of my company, the wedding was in motion. Deposits paid, invitations drafted, everything starting to feel irreversible. Then she looked at me and made it clear that if I said no, she might walk. I'm 33 and I built my consulting firm from nothing. No investors, no rich family, no lucky break. Just me, a laptop, and too many nights that turned into mornings. I skipped trips, lived on instant noodles when cash was tight, and gave up on balance a long time ago. So yes, I'm protective of what I built, because it's mine. About a year ago, I met Marissa. She was 29, confident, the kind of woman people notice before she even spoke. She knew how to dress, how to talk, how to make a room lean toward her. I couldn't do any of that, and maybe that was part of why I fell for her. At first, it felt easy. She seemed to respect the grind, not just the results. I thought I'd finally found someone who understood what it took to build something from scratch. A year later, we were engaged. The proposal was simple. Dinner, a quiet moment, me asking, her saying yes. For a while, I let myself believe I'd gotten lucky. Wedding planning wasn't my thing, but Marissa took over. Venue, dress appointments, catering, flowers, all of it. She handled everything with such calm certainty that it was easier to let her run with it. About 3 months before the wedding, we were at the kitchen table. She had her laptop open, flipping through floral ideas. I was half listening, half drinking coffee, pretending I cared about flowers. Then she said, "We need to talk about my parents." I looked up. "Okay, what about them?" She smiled. "Don't you think we should do something special for them? For everything they've done for us?" I frowned. "Didn't we already? We took them to Scottsdale. I bought your dad that watch he wanted. What else are you thinking?" She closed the laptop and leaned forward. "I was thinking maybe you could give them a small stake in your business." For a second, I thought I'd heard her wrong. "I'm sorry," I said. "A what?" "A small percentage," she said. "Just as a gesture, it would mean a lot to them." I stared at her. "You want me to give your parents part of my company as a gift?" "Yes," she said, smiling like this was normal. "It's a sign of trust and respect. They've done so much for me. This would show them you appreciate them too." I laughed once, mostly to buy myself a second. "Marissa, I built this company from nothing. Your parents had nothing to do with it. Why would I give them equity?" Her smile slipped. "Because they're my parents. My family is about to be your family too. This isn't just business, Ethan. It's about showing them they matter." I set my mug down before I dropped it. "I don't think you understand how this works," I said. "Equity isn't a symbolic thank you gift. It's legal ownership." She sighed like I was being difficult. "You're overthinking it. It's just a small gesture. They're not going to take over." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" "The point is they didn't build it," I said. "They didn't invest in it. They didn't help me when this was me taking contracts and sleeping 4 hours a night. Why would I hand them part of something I bled for?" Her face tightened. "Because without them, I wouldn't even be here," she said, sharper now. "Don't you think they deserve something in return?" I stared at her, trying to decide whether this was entitlement, pressure from her parents, or both. "They deserve respect," I said. "That doesn't mean I sign over part of my company." That ended it for the night, at least on the surface. No yelling, no dramatic exit. Just silence thick enough to make the apartment feel smaller. Later in bed, she turned her back to me and stayed that way. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. The request was insane, but what bothered me more was how normal she'd tried to make it sound. Smooth. Reasonable. As if the strange part wasn't the demand, as if the strange part was me hesitating. And once that thought got in, it wouldn't leave. Looking back, there had been signs. Marissa had always been a little extravagant, but it wasn't just taste, it was expectation. She came from the kind of family where money was always there. Better hotels, better gifts, better everything. She moved through the world like the upgrade was already hers and the only question was who was covering it. Lying there in the dark, listening to her breathe like nothing had shifted, I had the sinking feeling this wasn't some weird one-off request. It felt like the first crack, and once I saw it, I couldn't stop wondering what was behind it. The next morning, it was already moving again. Whatever I thought had cooled off overnight hadn't. She'd just changed the angle, and somehow that was worse. Until then, I told myself her taste for expensive things was harmless. Annoying sometimes, sure, but harmless. Now it felt different. Now it felt like she was looking at my business, my actual life's work, the way some people look at a trust fund, something to be divided up if you asked with enough confidence. I woke up hoping she'd come to her senses. People say stupid things when they're emotional, that's what I told myself. Maybe she'd had one bad moment, one wildly bad read, and today we'd pretend it never happened. I was wrong. That morning, I made coffee like I always did. For a few minutes, everything looked normal. She kissed my cheek, thanked me, scrolled through her phone while I worked through emails. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then she set her phone down. I kept thinking about our conversation. My stomach tightened before she even said the rest. "Marissa," I said, already tired, "we don't need to do this again." She gave me that polished smile she used when she wanted something expensive to sound reasonable. "You're still missing the bigger picture," she said. "This isn't about control. It's about showing my parents you value them the way I do." I closed my laptop. Slowly. Because I knew if I didn't, I'd snap it shut. "I do respect your parents," I said, "but giving them equity isn't some symbolic family gesture. It's a legal and financial mess." She tilted her head like I was making things more complicated than they needed to be. "Why does everything have to be so technical with you?" Because it was technical. Because once someone owns part of a company, they own part of it. That wasn't me being rigid. That was reality. "Once they have a stake, it's theirs," I said. "Whether they do anything or not. And no offense, but your parents don't know the first thing about running a consulting firm." She waved that off immediately. "They don't have to run anything. That's not the point." I looked at her for a second too long. She wasn't floating ideas. She was pushing. Calmly, repeatedly. Like she thought if she kept her tone soft enough, I'd stop noticing what she was asking for. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Every time I opened a contract or answered a client email, the same thought came back. Is this what marriage with her would look like? Not one big betrayal, just pressure, reframed demands. That quiet kind of guilt that keeps showing up until saying no feels selfish. That night, we were on the couch watching something neither of us cared about. Out of nowhere, she turned to me and said, "It could help you too, you know." I muted the TV. What could? If my parents had a stake in the company. I just looked at her. She tucked her hair behind one ear and kept going, like she was presenting a smart, practical idea now. "My dad knows people in commercial real estate. My mom's in a bunch of women's business groups. They're connected, Ethan. They could open doors for you." There it was. New packaging, same demand. "My company doesn't need your parents to open doors," I said. "I've grown it just fine without them." "But think bigger," she said, leaning in. "You could scale faster. This isn't only about them. It's about us, our future." That word hung there for a second. Us. She'd moved it from her parents to our marriage, like if she tied it to our future, refusing would sound like I was refusing her. I spoke carefully because I could feel my patience thinning. "If this is about our future, then support the business I already built. Don't ask me to carve pieces off and hand them to your family." She frowned. Not hurt, not confused, just irritated that the tactic hadn't worked. "I am supporting you," she said. "I just think you're being short-sighted." It wasn't short-sighted. It was self-preservation, and I think somewhere in that moment she knew I wasn't going to fold easily. I tried once more to end it without turning it into a fight. "Your parents matter to you, I get that, but this crosses a line." Her expression changed then. Slightly. enough to make something in me go cold. She wasn't just frustrated anymore, she was recalculating. The next day, I found out what that meant. I was at work when her mother called me. That alone was unusual. We'd always been polite, but never close enough for random daytime calls. I answered anyway. Her voice came through bright and sugary. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, "for being so thoughtful about including us in the business." For a second, I said nothing. I honestly thought I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry." She laughed softly. "Oh, don't be modest. Marissa told us you were planning to give us a small share of the company as a wedding gift. We were so touched." I stood up from my desk without meaning to. There was this strange ringing in my ears, the kind that happens when your body understands something a second before your mind catches up. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. "I never agreed to that." The warmth in her voice thinned out immediately. "That's not what Marissa told us." "Well," I said, keeping my voice level with effort, "Marissa and I have not agreed on this, and I'm not comfortable with it." A pause, long enough to feel deliberate. Then she said, much cooler now, "I see. I hope you'll reconsider." She hung up a second later, but the damage was already done. I stood there staring at my phone, realizing Marissa hadn't just pushed me in private. She'd gone ahead and told her parents this was happening before I'd said yes. Not because she was confused, because she thought cornering me would work. And for the first time, I started to wonder how far she was willing to take it. By the time her mother said this would mean a lot to us, it was already too late to pretend this was a misunderstanding. The line had been crossed, quietly, deliberately. I ended the call without another word, staring at my phone like it might explain how things had escalated this far. My hands were shaking. Not from confusion. From anger. She hadn't just asked anymore. She'd moved pieces. When I got home, I didn't even take my jacket off. "Why did your mom call me about my business?" Marissa looked up from the couch, calm. Too calm. "I thought it would help if you understood how much this means to them." I let out a short, sharp breath. "You told them I agreed." She shrugged like it was nothing. "Sometimes people need a little push." "A push?" My voice snapped before I could stop it. "You told them I was giving them part of my company." She crossed her arms, irritation flashing. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I was trying to get everyone aligned." "Aligned?" I stepped closer. "This isn't a group project. This is my company. You don't get to promise pieces of it to anyone, especially not behind my back." Something in her expression shifted then. The softness dropped. "If you can't do this one thing for me," she said, slower now, sharper, "maybe you don't care about me as much as you say you do." It landed exactly how she meant it to. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. I stared at her, the weight of that sentence settling in. This wasn't about her parents anymore, it was leverage. "You know what?" I said, quieter now. "If this is how you handle things, maybe we need to rethink some things." I didn't wait for her response. I walked out, needing distance before I said something I couldn't take back, but the thought followed me anyway. This wasn't the peak. It felt like the beginning, and I was right. The next morning, I called my best friend Marcus. If anyone would cut through the noise, it was him. I laid it all out. The request, the pressure, her mom's call. There was a long pause on the line, then he exhaled. "Man, this is bad." "Yeah," I muttered. "No, I mean bad. Like exit now bad." I leaned against my desk, eyes closed. "She thinks it's reasonable." "She doesn't think," he said flatly. "She's testing how far she can push you." I didn't respond. "Let me get this straight," he continued. "She's basically saying, give my parents part of your business or we're done." "Pretty much." "And you're still considering this?" That question stuck longer than anything else. Because for the first time, I didn't have a clean answer. That night, she didn't circle the topic. She went straight for it. We were sitting in the living room, the silence stretched thin, when she said, "So, what's your decision?" I didn't look at her right away. About what? The shares, she said. No softness this time. Are you doing it or not? I turned to her. No. No explanation, no cushioning, just no. She leaned back, arms crossed, studying me like she was measuring something. Then maybe this isn't going to work. There it was. No mask, no strategy wrapped in politeness. Just the threat, clean and direct. For a second, I searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. There wasn't any. Maybe it isn't, I said. That was the moment she didn't expect. Her eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. The first crack. You're really willing to throw everything away over this? I held her gaze. You're the one tying everything to it. Silence. Heavy. Final. She stood up and walked out without another word. And just like that, the room felt different. Not empty. Just settled. Like something had already shifted and wasn't going back. Sitting there, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just a fight. This was the line. And whichever side we ended up on, nothing after this was going to look the same. The next day blurred. I went through motions, emails, calls, meetings, but nothing stuck. My head kept replaying every version of the same moment, like if I ran it enough times it would change. It didn't. Eventually, one name surfaced. Claire. She wasn't just my lawyer. She was someone who had seen situations go sideways in ways most people never do. If there was a clear read here, she'd have it. I called her. I need to talk. Come by, she said immediately. No questions. When I walked into her office that afternoon, she handed me a coffee and gave me a look that said she already knew this wasn't small. All right, she said, sitting across from me. What happened? I told her everything. No edits, no softening, the request, the pressure, the call to her parents, the ultimatum. As I talked, her expression shifted, curiosity to concern to something closer to disbelief. When I finished, she leaned back, arms crossed. Okay, she said slowly. Let me make sure I understand this. I nodded. Your fiancée wants you to give her parents equity in your company. As a wedding gift. Yeah. And when you said no, she escalated, involved them, and then threatened to end the engagement. Another nod. Claire exhaled, low and steady. Ethan, she said, locking eyes with me, this isn't just a red flag. She paused just long enough for it to land. It's a preview. By the time Claire finished, there wasn't really a question left, just whether I was willing to face it. And the answer to that felt heavier than anything she'd said. Like, seriously, she added, leaning back. This is the kind of thing you wave in the air and run the other way from. I know, I said, but it came out quieter than I expected. I love her, and I can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is exactly what it feels like. You're not overreacting, Claire said immediately. You're finally reacting correctly. I didn't answer. You cannot cross this line, she continued, more measured now. Not emotionally, not legally. If you give away equity like this, you're opening yourself up to problems that don't go away. Like what? I asked, even though part of me didn't want to hear it. She didn't hesitate. If you transfer shares to her parents, they own them. Full stop. If they decide later they want more influence, you can't just take it back. If they sell those shares, you could end up with someone else inside your company. Someone you didn't choose. I felt my jaw tighten. And if you marry her, she added, it gets worse. Those shares could become part of marital assets. In a divorce, everything gets pulled apart. You don't want strangers or ex-in-laws attached to your business. A cold weight settled in my stomach. So this could screw me from multiple angles, I said. Exactly, she replied. And let's be honest, this isn't a one-time ask. If she's pushing this hard now, what happens later? Bigger demands? More pressure? Less room to say no. That part hit harder than the legal stuff. I stared down at my coffee, watching the surface barely ripple. This wasn't just about one decision. It was about a pattern I couldn't unsee anymore. What do I do? I asked finally. Claire leaned forward, her tone sharpening. You protect yourself. First, legally. Lock down your operating agreement. No share transfers without your explicit approval. Make sure your finances are completely separate. No gray areas, no overlap. Already done, I said. I've always kept things separate. Good, she nodded. Then the harder part? You need to be clear with her. No more soft language, no, maybe later. You tell her this isn't happening. Period. She paused, but the meaning sat there anyway. And if she can't accept that, I walk, I finished quietly. Claire didn't soften it. She just nodded. That's what protecting yourself looks like. That night, I walked into my apartment with something I hadn't felt in days. Clarity. Not comfort. Just clarity. Marissa was on the couch, scrolling like nothing had happened. I didn't sit down. We need to talk. She looked up slowly, guarded. About what? I didn't play along. About the business, about your parents, about all of this. She sighed, already irritated. We've been through this, Ethan. I don't know why you're turning it into such a big deal. Because it is, I said, steady. And I need you to hear this clearly. I am not giving your parents any stake in my company. That's final. Her eyes narrowed. So that's it? You decide and I just accept it? Yes, I said. No hesitation. Because this isn't about compromise. This is about you asking for something that isn't yours. She stood up, anger rising fast now. Wow, she said. So I'm selfish for wanting my family included? After everything they've done for us? Included isn't the same as entitled, I shot back. I've gone out of my way for them. Trips, gifts, time. But giving away part of my business? That's not inclusion. That's crossing a line. She crossed her arms, jaw tight. Fine. If you're this selfish, maybe we shouldn't be getting married. There it was again. The threat. But this time it didn't land the same. Because I was already there. That's already been decided, I said. Silence. Real silence this time. She just stared at me like she was waiting for me to take it back, to soften it, to fix it. I didn't. The next morning I called Claire and told her everything. You handled it exactly right, she said, but don't expect it to end cleanly. Someone who pushes this far doesn't just stop. She was right. Over the next few days, Marissa shifted tactics again. Not demands this time, narrative. I was cold, unappreciative, ungrateful. She told mutual friends her version, carefully framed, leaving out just enough to make me look unreasonable. But most of them didn't buy it, because something about it didn't add up, even from the outside. By the end of the week, the fog lifted, not because things got easier, but because they got clearer. This wasn't something to fix, it was something to mend. And when we sat down again, across from each other, I could see it in her posture, in the way she watched me. She still thought I'd cave. Still thought this was just a matter of pressure. What she didn't realize yet was that I was already done. By that point, there was no fixing it, only impact. And the strangest part was how calm it looked right before everything finally broke. She'd been quiet all day, which didn't relax me. It did the opposite. Marissa was never quiet without a reason. Usually there were texts, links, complaints, little nudges designed to pull my attention where she wanted it. That day, nothing. No noise. Just the kind of silence that waits. After dinner, she set her glass down and looked at me. So, she said, have you thought any more about what we talked about? I put my fork down and met her eyes. I don't need more time, I said. I made my decision. The answer is no. It's not happening. Her arms folded immediately. You're acting like I asked for half the company. It's a small stake, a gesture. You're turning it into this huge dramatic thing. Because it is a huge thing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Once I give away shares, I lose control of that portion of my company. Your parents could sell them. They could interfere. And if we got married, those shares could end up dragged through a divorce. This isn't symbolic. This is me protecting what I built. Her mouth tightened. If your business is so precious, she said, maybe you shouldn't be getting married at all. The room went still. For a second, neither of us moved. It was one of those moments where the truth arrives before the sound does. Then I nodded once. Maybe you're right, I said. Maybe I shouldn't be marrying you. That landed. She stared at me, breathing shallow now, like she'd expected resistance but not refusal. Not clean, final refusal. Then her face hardened. You're going to regret this, she said. My parents are going to think you're a greedy, ungrateful asshole. And once people hear what happened, they'll think the same. I let out one bitter laugh. Tell them, I said. Tell whoever you want. I'm not the one who needs a version of events. Something flickered in her eyes. I kept going. And before you try to spin this, remember, I kept everything. The texts, the calls. Every time you pushed this after I said no. The color drained from her face. You recorded me? After your mother called me thanking me for something I never agreed to, I said. Yeah, I decided I wasn't going to be cornered without proof. She opened her mouth, shut it, then looked away for the first time since the conversation started. That was the moment she understood this wasn't going to be managed. Not privately, not neatly. Without another word, she grabbed her bag and walked out. The next few days were ugly. She called over and over from different numbers, cycling through anger, tears, blame, apology. At first, I ignored every call. Then one evening, against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice came through already shaking. I'm sorry, she said. I was under so much pressure from my parents. They kept telling me I needed to make sure the marriage was secure. I let it get in my head. I sat there listening to the excuse form itself. That's not what happened, I said. There was a pause. You didn't just crack under pressure, I continued. You pressured me, repeatedly. You involved your parents. You tried guilt, then logic, then threats. You knew exactly what you were doing. I didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she didn't. At that point, it didn't matter. If you loved me, I said, keeping my voice even, you wouldn't have tried to force me into something that put everything I built at risk. Love doesn't look like that. She started crying harder, but it felt different now. Less like pain, more like panic. Like she could feel the door closing and still thought emotion might stop it. I hung up before she finished and blocked the number. After that, she went wider. My parents, my friends, even a couple of business contacts. Same pattern every time. She'd soften the facts, tilt the story, leave out the part where she demanded equity for her parents and turn the engagement into leverage. The first real wave came from her parents. I had blocked Marissa, but they found a way through. Her mother called first. Her voice was smooth, polished, almost warm. Too warm. I just wanted to clear up any misunderstandings, she said. I'm sure Aubrey never meant to upset you. I didn't bother pretending. There's no misunderstanding, Mrs. Holloway, I said. Your daughter tried to pressure me into giving you and your husband a stake in my business. When I refused, she threatened to end the engagement. Silence. Not shocked silence. Calculating silence. Then she sighed softly like I was the difficult one. Well, from our perspective, it wasn't pressure. It was a conversation about family, trust, and joining lives. There it was again. That same polished reframing. Take something outrageous, wrap it in warm language, and wait for the target to feel cold for resisting. No, I said. It was pressure. Her tone cooled by a degree. You know, Austin, marriage requires generosity, flexibility. Sometimes a man has to prove where his priorities are. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because it made everything simpler. My priorities are exactly why this isn't happening, I said. And just so we're clear, if anyone keeps contacting me about my company, I'll treat it as harassment. That got her attention. You'd really go that far? You all already did. She didn't respond right away, and in that gap I could hear what she was thinking. Whether I was bluffing, whether I was still manageable, whether there was one more angle left. There wasn't. When I ended the call, I stood there with the phone still in my hand, heart pounding, but not from doubt anymore. That part was gone. What replaced it was colder than anger and a lot more useful. Certainty. And once that settles in, people who thought they could move you start to panic. By then, the mask was slipping everywhere. Not all at once. Just enough that anyone paying attention could see what had really been underneath it the whole time. That's pretty clear, I said. There was a pause on the line, the kind where someone realizes the softer approach failed and starts reaching for a sharper one. Then her mother tried again. Well, maybe she just didn't explain herself properly. You know how emotional she gets. She only wanted to include us because we care so much about her future. And yours. I almost laughed. Mrs. Holloway, with all due respect, this isn't about emotion or care. I'm not giving away part of something I built from the ground up, and I'm not going to be pushed into it. Her voice cooled instantly. Austin, I think you're being very short-sighted. Family requires compromise. If you can't understand that, maybe Aubrey was right to reconsider the relationship. Maybe she expected that to hit some nerve. Maybe she thought invoking the breakup like a moral judgment would make me crawl back into line. It didn't. Maybe she was, I said. Goodbye. I hung up before she could answer and blocked her too. That should have been enough. It wasn't. The next wave came through mutual friends. Aubrey moved fast, telling her version to anyone willing to listen. In her telling, I was controlling, obsessed with money, unwilling to share the success that apparently belonged to more people than the person who built it. A few people reached out almost immediately. One of them, Lauren, texted, "Hey, I heard some things from Aubrey. I just want to understand. Did you really end the engagement because she wanted her parents involved in the business?" I stared at the message for a second, then decided I was done letting other people frame this for me. I wrote back, "Here's the short version. She demanded I give her parents a stake in my company as a wedding gift. When I refused, she threatened to end the engagement. I wasn't going to be manipulated into that. So, yes, I ended it. I have proof if you want to see it," Lauren replied fast. Okay, wow. That is not what I heard. I'm sorry. Thanks for telling me. That became the pattern. Someone would come in cautious, carrying some polished version of Aubrey's story. I'd give them the actual one. Sometimes I'd send a screenshot. Sometimes I didn't have to. Most of them figured it out pretty quickly once the missing pieces showed up. A few stayed neutral, which was fine. I wasn't trying to recruit anyone. I just wasn't going to wear a lie because it looked better on her. And slowly, very noticeably, she started losing people. Then she changed tactics again. When the pressure campaign stopped working, the apologies started. Voicemails, emails, long, shaky messages written like confessions. One voicemail began with her already crying. She said she was sorry. Said her parents got in her head. Said she'd pushed too hard. Said she loved me and didn't want to lose me. I deleted it before it finished. Love. That word meant something to me. Enough that hearing her use it then felt almost insulting. Love doesn't corner you. It doesn't recruit backup. It doesn't threaten to leave unless ownership changes hands. A few days later, an email came through. She said she'd made a mistake. Said she was under pressure. Said she missed me. Asked if we could work it out. For a minute, I was tempted to respond. Not because I missed her, but because part of me wanted to list every calculated thing she'd done and make her sit inside it. I didn't, because that would have pulled me back into the exact cycle I was finally out of. Instead, I forwarded everything to Claire and asked if I needed to do anything else. She told me as long as Aubrey wasn't actively interfering with my business or escalating into harassment, the best move was silence. So, I stayed silent. By the end of the first week, things started to quiet down. The call stopped. The messages thinned out. For the first time in days, it felt like maybe the worst of it had passed. Then one of my employees pulled me aside after a team meeting. "Hey," she said carefully, "I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a post about you online." My stomach dropped before she finished. "From who?" She hesitated. Someone named Aubrey Holloway. She's saying some pretty rough things. I kept my face still. Like what? She's calling you controlling, greedy, saying you abandoned her right before the wedding because you didn't want to share your success with her family. Of course she was. I thanked her, waited until I was alone, then looked it up. It was exactly what I expected. Long, dramatic, polished enough to sound believable if you didn't know the actual story. She talked about betrayal, about selfishness, about how unwilling I'd been to build a future together. The comments were split. Some people bought it, some didn't. A few were already asking questions she probably hadn't wanted asked. I didn't respond publicly. I just took screenshots and sent them to Claire. This, she said when I called, is why I told you to document everything. If she escalates, we're ready. Thankfully, it never got that far. The post lost momentum. People moved on. And the more she pushed, the worse she looked. Not heartbroken, not wronged, just angry that the pressure hadn't worked. Then the truth started catching up to her. Friends who had leaned her way at first started reaching out to apologize. A couple admitted they'd only gotten the cleaned-up version at the beginning. Once they heard the rest, they couldn't believe how far she'd taken it. And that was when it finally settled in. I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. Looking back now, I know exactly what I walked away from. Not just one bad marriage, a whole future built on pressure, guilt, and slow, smiling encroachment. I kept my company. I kept my boundaries. I kept the part of myself that knew when no had to mean no. And Aubrey? She can tell whatever version she needs to. It doesn't change the outcome. My business is still mine. My name survived just fine. And my future looks a hell of a lot cleaner without her in it.